What's going on, everybody? Chasing that bass, coming back to you guys with another little tip and tutorial video. Today I want to talk all about punching and flipping. So we're going to cover a couple different baits. We're also going to cover the rigging, and I'm going to even rig it up and show you guys some little secrets to help you catch a couple more fish. So the first thing I just mentioned, we're going to be going over some baits that I like to use when it comes to flipping thick, heavy mats, flipping heavier structure, heavier cover, around heavy wood. What I'm going to be throwing is basically one of two different baits. So in some instances, I'm going to be looking to throw something that's giving off a lot of vibration, moving a lot of water, displacing a lot of water. And other days, when the fish aren't biting as well, I'm going to switch that and tone it down a little bit to something that's a little bit more subtle. So I've got three different baits kind of lined up here to talk to you guys about today. The first one I want to talk about is going to be the Missile Baits Chunky D. This bait right here is a little 3.5 inch flapper tail craw. This is one of my staples in my box now. I picked these up last year to give them a try, and I've come to find that you can trim this bait down. You can use it in a magnitude of different situations, different baits. Really, it's a kick-ass bait to put in your box. So I'm going to recommend that you pick up some of these and give them a try. This little guy, this is kind of the do-all. I pick this up a lot of times when I know the fish aren't feeding on huge bait. Also, when I know that I'm at a lake where we're not talking about catching 4, 5, 6, 7 pounders all the time. Now, in those lakes where I know there's some bigger fish around, I'm going to upsize that flapper crawl to the Reaction Innovations Spicy Beaver. Now, if you watch my chatterbait video, you already saw this little guy. If you haven't, you should jump back, check that bad boy out. I dropped some really good tips on that. But this little guy here puts off and displaces a ton of water. It's gonna get bites. I flip with this a lot. One of my favorite things about this bait is how it has a little fat head on the back. Basically, what that allows for is when you're rigging and using a straight shank hook like I like to use on this, it's gonna allow that bait to not rip as much, help you catch a couple more fish. So those two baits are gonna be my more erratic, really good bite days. Those are going to be what I'm keying in to catch those fish on. Now, to flip the script on that, when the bite isn't as good or I feel like fish are being a little bit more subtle, I'm going to switch over. Still going to be a Reaction Innovations, but this is going to be the Sweet Beaver. This is a 4.2 inch here. So this is just a really good creature bait. One of my favorite things about this bait is actually when I throw it on lighter tackle. When I'm throwing it on lighter tackle, with this tail that it's got here, it allows this bait to kind of glide down through the water rather than just drop straight down in the water column. I found that sometimes the fish really love that, and it'll key in and get me a couple good bites. But for today's purposes, that's going to be more of my subtle flipping bait, flipping around those lily pads. Now, one other thing I'm going to do sometimes, and that's when that bite is really, really finicky, is I'm going to downsize from that 4.2 inch to a 3.5 inch. It's called the Smalley Beaver by Reaction Innovations. Colored here, I got one of my all-time favorites, June Bug. This little bad boy right here gets a ton of bites. If the bite's ever tough and I'm fishing around cover, this little guy I can count on to get me a couple bites. So, flipping on that, we're going to kind of talk about the tackle. What am I using when I'm throwing these baits, when I'm targeting these fish? So when it comes to heavy cover, there's two main ways you can really fish. I know a lot of guys are huge fans of throwing braid, being able to slackline, crack those fish, get them out of the cover. Now, me personally, I really like fluorocarbon. I like the feel I get out of fluorocarbon, and I also like how when that fluorocarbon's sliding and slipping down through a lily pad, it doesn't make noise. I can get in and I can attack those fish really quietly, especially in the pressured bodies of water that I am fishing a lot of the time. When it comes to the rod and reel setup, I really like to have a super fast gear ratio. I'm talking at least a 7-to-1-to-1. I even like to get into the 8-to-1-to-1s if at all possible. The reason for that is when I'm able to get a bite in that cover and those fish crack that bait, I want to be able to wench them and get them out of that cover as fast as possible so that way I can get them in the boat, put them in the bag. Typically, I'm going to be throwing that 7 or 8-to-1 gear ratio on a 7'6" heavy, sometimes a medium heavy if I'm fishing lighter cover. Terminal tackle wise, I kind of mentioned it earlier. I'm a big believer in throwing a straight shank hook. Now, when it comes to flipping cover, it's going to really depend on how thick a cover I'm fishing. If we're talking some light lily pads, a lot of times I'm only going to be throwing like a ½ ounce weight. Basically, my goal is going to be to use the lightest weight I possibly can, but still get that bait through the cover and down and in. Now, as we get into heavier midday summer, thick, nasty junk, a lot of times I'm going to be going with a 3/4 ounce or upgrading to even an ounce, or in some occasions an 1.5 ounce weight. I know that sounds a little bit crazy for bass fishing. However, when you're flipping, it's very important to be able to get in and out of those holes efficiently and cover a lot of water to get in front of fish and get bites. So what I want to do is share with you guys a little secret or a tip and trick when it comes to throwing a straight shank hook. So I'm just gonna use some 50-pound braid here and set you up with a little idea. So when I'm rigging this hook on, I'm gonna be throwing a snell knot every single time. So basically what a snell knot is gonna be is it's a really simple knot. All you do is, one important factor to this, make sure when you start with your line, you're going down through the top of that hook. But basically you're just going to take your line through, you're going to double it back down the hook. I like to pinch it off way back here, and then you're going to double it back over itself. So once I have that line doubled back down where it's coming from, you're going to take that line around that hook. For me personally, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, once you have your 5 loops around that eye of the hook up there, all you're going to do is take that tag end and you're going to run it back down through the loop that you created when you doubled that line over. Pull that bad boy through, get it wet, cinch it down. With the snell knot, I'm going to show you the reason for why I'm throwing this when it comes to flipping and hitting all this heavy cover. So let me get this line snapped off here. Grab the dullest knife in my box. That's some good 50-pound braid. So, the reason for the snell knot. Normally your hook is just hanging down there. If you've just got a regular knot, you're going to sit there, bait's going to stay straight. That's going to cost you some bites. Now, if you notice with that snell knot, what that's going to allow that hook to do is pop. And that's going to pop straight up. So when I'm flipping into that cover, a fish grabs onto that bad boy, that pop is going to allow me to pop that hook right into the top of his mouth, give me the best hookup ratio. It's going to help me land more fish. Now, something I'm always going to be using when I'm flipping heavy cover is going to be a bobber stop. The bobber stop's really important because it's going to allow that hook and weight not to come away, especially when you're fighting a fish in heavy cover. You don't want that weight swinging out of the fish's mouth, giving him some reasons or some tension to where he can pop that hook loose. We've talked about the baits, we've talked about the rigging, we've talked about the rods. The one thing we haven't talked about is, well, where the heck do you throw it? So when you're throwing this bait, I'm going to be throwing it in, as I mentioned earlier, lily pads, the cheesy mats. I even like to throw a flipping style bait like this around laydowns, exposed wood, anything where I feel like a fish is going to be tucked up in and underneath. I'm going to be using this a lot of the times. One other situation in which you'll see me picking this up is going to be fishing around docks. Now when I'm fishing docks, again, if there's no cover at all, lightening that weight up, maybe even drop it down to a 3/8. I want to be really subtle with that bait and really target all of those poles, all of those locations where a fish could be sitting there waiting for something to swim by so that it can ambush it. And that's going to be a quick little rundown on flipping and pitching when it comes to fishing with Chase. Let me know down below though. Drop me some comments. What is your favorite flipping bait? As always, make sure that you leave a like down below, drop a comment down there, and if you're new, hit that subscribe button over here. I really love it. It really helps out the channel, helps me out a lot. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. God bless.